Okay, so today talking about audient busing and routing, and essentially this is talking about getting everything going to various reverbs or delays using the aux sends on the mixer, and also doing subgroup mixing on the mixer. Remember we talked about subgroup mixing last week, and we're going to be talking about how to do it on this particular mixer. So we're going to be using the routing matrix a lot today, and we're going to be using the aux sends a lot today. So just a couple terms real quick I just wanted to go over here in the beginning to zero out the board. When somebody says zero out the board, it means return the gear settings back to their start positions. So you have to know what those start positions are because they're a little bit different for different pieces of gear and on different pieces of gear, even though some, like for example, the aux sends, they zero out all the way around to the left-hand side of the aux send. And but like an EQ, for example, might zero out straight up and down at 12 o'clock. So they have different positions, and so you really want to know what those different positions are when you zero out the board. To normal something, or the normal position for something, it's how gear is set up before you do any patching. So if we say something is normaled into something else, that means you don't have to do anything. That's just how it's set up, like the normal way it's set up. So those are two things we're going to be talking about today: zeroing out things and normal things. All right, so let's just do a little quick review on how Pro Tools reverb works. And I just want to go into how this works because we're going to be talking about reverb sending reverb today. And I just want to kind of explain, just to refresh your memory about this in Pro Tools. So we've got this track here, and it's this Rubadoo track. So if I play it, okay, so if I play, you can hear the track here. And so if I wanted to go ahead and send my drums to the reverb here like this, well, what I do is I have this reverb set up on an aux track here, and I've got the reverb set right here on the aux track. There it is, and it's got an input here that says reverb, drum reverb, and that's just an aux track there. And over here I've got all my different drum channels here, and they all have these sends on them, all these buses on them, sending it over to this one reverb right here. If I want to look at this a slightly different way, I can just go over here to my expanded sends and go to send A, and there we go. There's all my levels for things there. And in this, we're sending stuff over, we're connecting up here, and this would be just like an aux, like one of the auxes, aux 1 and 2 or something like that. And I could even rename it like that in here. So let me just rename that so it makes sense. Aux 1-2. Whoops, wait, hold on, I just put a slash in there by accident. There we go. So in here, aux 1 and 2, aux 1, 2, aux 1, 2, all of these here are sending over to this aux 1 and 2 here. And this is how we do things on the Mackie, it's how we do things on the Audient. And it's the same thing in Pro Tools, it's got a name here for this, and it's just aux 1, 2, or drum reverb, or whatever you want it to be called. And anything you want to go to this reverb here, you're going to send it to this bus here. And let's say over here my guitar reverb, for example, let's call this aux 3 and 4. So we just have a name for it here, aux 3 and 4, boom, boom, boom. It goes in here to this reverb here. And this is how this all works out here. You can see I've got this, and these all have different levels here going into this guitar reverb here. It's basically exactly like the same thing on the Audient, on the Mackie 1604, any of these things here. So this is how we have this set up here. You've got the audio, the dry sound here, and the aux reverb sound here. This is our dry sound, this is our wet sound here. This channel here is the reverb sound. And this here is the little knob on the Mackie or the Audient, something like that. So the same as an aux send on the Mackie. So if you remember how your Mackie worked, if you remember how Pro Tools worked, it's the same on the Audient. Remember on the Mackie you had two auxes, 1 and 2, and you can send those to the reverb, aux out. You had your master aux out here like this. Let me just get the little, there we go. So we had our master aux out like this, It goes to the reverb in, and the reverb has an input, the reverb has an output, and it comes back into our aux return over here. Well, essentially, auxes 1 and 2 are going to be, in our situation, auxes 1 and 2 in the Audient room are set up for the Alesis MIDI verb. That's how they're normaled. That's what our normal setup is. So if anytime you want to send a sound to the reverb to get a reverb sound going on, you're going to send it to auxes 1 and 2. Aux 1 is left, aux 2 is right. And just in general, for all these different pieces of gear, odd numbers are always left, and even numbers are always right. So aux 1 and 2 is your Alesis MIDI verb, and that's coming back into stereo input number 1. So in this Pro Tools example here, this aux here that says reverb drum here, this would be our stereo input number 1 on the Audient. Okay, so let's just go over here and take a quick look at this real quick. So this is a slightly different Audient. It's this smaller Audient board, but it's laid out basically the same. So up here is where our stereo inputs are right here, the 4 stereo inputs. And remember, we talked about these yesterday. And across the top up here are where your aux sends are. Right here, your aux sends. So aux sends 1 and 2, like this, are going to go out to the reverb. They go out to the reverb unit, and then the reverb unit turns down and brings them back into the board, and they come back into stereo input number 1. So if I want to hear my reverb, I just turn up that stereo input number 1, and I can hear my reverb. I assign it to the mix, and then I can hear the reverb. So same thing with Pro Tools. If I go over here, I send stuff out from auxes 1 and 2 here. It goes to the reverb here, and if I want to hear that reverb, all I do is I just turn up this fader here, bring up the fader to unity, and now we can hear that reverb. And that's how things work. And it looks a little bit different in Pro Tools, but it essentially works the same way. Pro Tools, Audient, Mackie, any of those things. And I know you haven't really put your hands on these things yet, so it's a little bit hard to we're still kind of imagining all this stuff. But once you've done it a couple times, you'll be like, oh wow, that's actually not super, super hard. So I've got, as usual, I've got step-by-steps going on here, sending a sound to reverb at SAE. Now this is specific for at SAE because of how we have things normaled. We have the reverb in that studio normaled going from auxes 1 and 2 and then coming back into stereo input number 1. So step number 1 is you turn up aux sends 1 and 2 on the channel you want to send to the reverb. Like let's say channel 1 is a vocal, and then we want to send that vocal to the reverb. We turn up aux sends 1 and 2 on that channel. Then step number 2 is you turn up the aux masters 1 and 2. This is the part that people always forget, is they always forget to turn up that aux master 1 and 2. Step number 3, the stereo input number 1, you push the mix button, so you're going to get it going into the mix left-right mix bus. And then step number 4 is you turn up the level on the stereo input number 1. At this point, you should be hearing reverb. There's no patching required. You do not need to do any patching. You don't need to touch any patch bays or patch cables or anything like that. So let's just go over here real quick and take a look at the, I think it's this one here. Yeah. So our stereo input number 1 is this section up here. Right here, and the mix button is this little gray button right here. Here, I'll do it on mix on stereo input number 4 here. So this is 1, 2, 3, and 4. In stereo input number 4, we have a mix button right here. This mix button, you push that button, and here's your level knob for the stereo inputs here. Stereo input 1, stereo input 2, stereo input 3, stereo input 4, and you can just turn that up, and there you're going to be getting signal. Now these stereo inputs do have routing matrix up top. There's only a fraction of the buttons though, because each one of these is stereo, because it is stereo. So it's not 1 through 12 buttons, it's only 6 buttons here. So we have 1 through 12, each one is stereo, and then you have the shift button here to get it to be 13 through 24. And so you can send that out to your DAW, or you could subgroup mix them as well. And then these here are for the fold back mix right here. And this here is the pan knob here. So it's really basic. There's no EQs, but you can send it into your DAW to record if you wanted to. Okay, and then down here we just have a solo and a cut button here, solo and cut here for each one of these stereo input returns. So most studios on their stereo input return will have maybe a reverb, but they might have like a CD player, an MP3 player, or something connected up to it as well, so you can play audio into your board, so you can just hear stuff for references and stuff like that. The way we have it set up is our stereo input number 1 is set for the Alesis MIDI verb, like right here. Okay, so you don't have to do anything. You just say, I want to send my vocal to a reverb. You turn off aux sends 1 and 2. You turn off aux master 1 and 2. And then you turn up the stereo input number 1, hit that mix button on there, and you should be hearing signal. When you're getting everything set up and ready to go, you should be able to see lights going up and down on the MIDI verb, because the MIDI verb does have a meter on there, so you can see what's happening on there. All right, and again, once you get in there, it'll be easier to understand once you're in there. You can bring in this video, you can watch the video, and check it out with the video, everything. Okay. All right. So hopefully that's a good enough explanation of it to kind of get you through until you can actually touch it. Inserts. Okay, so the next thing we want to talk about here is inserts. And how inserts work is you have your channel here, and let's say we have a compressor, and we want to put that compressor, we want to run the kick drum or the vocal through a compressor. In this case, we have a vocal here. So the vocal, the microphone goes into the channel, and then each of those channels has insert IO. It has insert in and out, send and return. And if we look over here at the other, this one, like this, just go look at the back of everything here. So here we can see, here's the send and return here, send and return. And remember, this darker one here is our input path, and this one here is our monitor path. And you've got the send and return here. Well, what that corresponds to is this right here. You've got the go in and out here. You can see right here on the box. So here's our compressor, the IO section on there. So what happens is you have a cable that plugs in from the send, which is out of the board, into the input on the compressor, and the out of the compressor is on the return on the board. And then you have to push that button there. Okay, so it's all laid out here. The button that we are pressing is right in here. So on the input path, it would be this button here. See where it says insert in? That's the button we're pressing. And if you're on the monitor path, it's this button right here, insert in right here on the monitor path. So we've got that there. So just going over the notes here, the Audient inserts, the send is sends the signal out from the console, and the returns the signal into the console. The send is connected to the device's input, and the device output is connected to the return. So it goes send is out, return is in. There's a little analogy that I like to use for this. It's like this: if you're over at my place, we're chilling, and suddenly I'm like, you know what? I want some milk. Can you please go get me some milk? And you're like, sure, no problem, Tony. I'll go get you some milk. And so what I'm doing is I'm sending you out of my house, and you're going to go into the store. I send you out of the house, and you go into the store. You buy the milk, you go out of the store, and you come back, and you return to my house. You return back into my house. So you send out to go to the in of the store, and you go out of the store to come return in to my house. So the send here is the dry signal coming from whatever it is, and that gets affected in some way, compression, EQ, something like that. And then the wet signal is coming back to us and returns back into the board. So the send is connected to the device's input, the compressor's input, and the device output is connected to the return. You know, Nico, absolutely. Sometimes you need a nice cold glass of milk. Maybe not cow milk, maybe other kinds of milk, but you might need that milk. The inserts can be applied to the input or monitor path. AJ has a good point there. The inserts can be applied to the input or monitor path. The input path is the affected signal will be recorded to the multi-track recorder. The monitor path is the affected signal will not be recorded to the multi-track recorder. Orange juice. Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, yeah. If you're ordering Nico's the milk, it just gets delivered to you. That's true. That's true. So I would send out the signal to Nico. It's like, I need milk, and then Nico would return with the milk to my place. So input path. Input path. If you want to record the signal in, you're going to do it on the input path, and that's right over here. Wait, not there, like this. Yep. The input path is the mic line path here, the darker path here. So we're going to use the insert on this one here if we want to record that effect into our multi-track. But if we want to just use if we just want to record the dry signal and use that effect on the monitor path, so we're going to be mixing with it later, but not the individual signal, then we're going to be using the monitor path right here, this insert right here. All right, so when you are doing inserts, you're going to be using the patch bay, and you're going to have to press the correct insert button to assign the insert. We're going to be talking about patch bay stuff tomorrow. So this whole insert thing, this is only part of the equation here so far. It's not the patching part. We haven't talked about that. For the Audient at SAE, remember the reverb is normaled into auxes 1 and 2, and it comes back into stereo input number 1. That's a send effect. We're using auxes and returns for a send effect. But what we're talking about right now is an insert effect, which is in the signal itself, and we're using inserts, sends, and returns for that, not auxes and stereo inputs. Okay, so there's a slight difference. You probably need to read this carefully to really make sure you internalize that difference and make sure you understand what that difference is. All right, next what we're going to talk about is subgroup mixing. So subgroup mixing, we've spoken about this before. Let's see, there we go, there's my groups. Okay, so just going to turn everything on here so we see everything here. All right, so all these drums are subgrouped in here. So if I go ahead and I go to my drums and I hit solo, if I hit solo on this, you can see it's subgrouped here, and you can hear it's just playing that one, it's just playing my drums. So if I want to go ahead and turn the drums down, all of them, I can just pull down one fader right here. And now we can no longer hear the drums. The reason why it's like that is because I have all these drum tracks here going into this one fader right here. Okay? And this is super useful for simplifying a mix down, so you're not having to go ahead, you're not having to grab a whole bunch of things and faders to control just your drums as a whole, just your drum group. Right? So we're just using one fader for that. Well, the same thing can be done in hardware. So if we go over here and we look at this console here, all these drums, if these are all drums right here, I can use a bus to send them over here to these buses here, and then I can control them with just two faders here. Now on a piece of hardware, if you're going stereo, you have to have two faders for it. You can't just have one fader. It has to be two faders. That's how hardware works. In Pro Tools, then in Pro Tools, we can use just one fader because a track can be stereo or mono. Matt, nut milk is a send effect. Yeah, it is. Send out my signal. Hey, I need my milk. I need my milk. All right. So our busing on the hardware, we're going to send it over to two buses here, 1 and 2. Okay, and the way we're going to do this, well, before we talk about how we do it, let's just talk about the kind of theory behind it. Let's say I'm mixing a live session, or this could be also a pre-recorded session that we're just working on the mix. And I've got horns, I've got background vocals, I've got drums, I've got a main vocal, I've got guitar, I've got bass. And all of these things have all of these different amounts of channels on my mixing console here. So I got one vocalist, I got 3 horns, I got 3 background vocals, I got 8 drums, or wait, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 drums. I've got two channels for my guitar, maybe for the microphone, maybe for the direct, and I've got 2 channels for my bass, once again for the mic and for the direct. So I've got all these setups here, and I want to go ahead and subgroup these together so that it all makes sense for me, so I can just grab a couple of faders and turn these up and down. So for all my horns, I might have them be stereo, and for my background vocals, I might have those be stereo. For my main vocals, I might be mono, my guitar and my bass are mono, my drums are stereo. And you can see the color coding down here across the bottom. I've got 2 horns in blue, I've got 2 background vocals in pink, I've got 2 drums in red, I've got 1 guitar in purple, 1 bass in green, and 1 vocal in this kind of orangey gold color. So this is how it would be set up on my console here. And if we look over here, we've got all these, oops. If we look over here, got all these nice faders here, these buses to control this stuff. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 1, 1, like that. So we can just go ahead and subgroup these really easily. So as long as they're labeled nice, I'm just grabbing a couple faders, so I can have a whole bunch of complex mixed stuff going on over here on the left-hand side, but on the right-hand side, it's much more simplified. So I'm not grabbing 5 different faders and having to keep the relationship between them and make sure they all still sound good when I turn them down. I can just grab 2 faders that are right there, left, right, and just turn them up and down. It makes things so much easier. So in a live situation, it would look kind of like this, and this is what I imagine AJ looks like when he's drumming here. He's got like a little mohawk in my picture here. Cool. So how to send signal to the buses on the Audient, okay? Well, you're usually going to bus from the monitor path. That's not to say you're always going to bus from the monitor path. There are situations, especially if you're using something like the Audient for a live situation, then you would bus from the input path. But you're usually going to bus from the monitor path, okay? So on the routing matrix, this is when we're going to press that long fader button. Remember, we've been kind of talking about the long fader button. It's right down here. Well, this is when we're actually going to be pressing it in. So you press that in. Now, you press the numbers for the buses you want to send it to. There are only 8 buses on the Audient. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. You don't have 12, you don't have 24, you just have 8. So you're only going to use 1 through 8 here. On the routing matrix, you're going to press the 1 and 2 here. So 1 would be left, 2 would be right. Everything always odd is left, even is right. Then we also want to press the pan button down here because you want to be able to pan between those left and right buses. And then on the buses over here on the right hand side, you're going to press the mix button, which is right here. See that? It says mix button, it's right here. And you're going to turn up the levels, which are down here, and this pink part here is the panning. So there's a pan knob there. And you'll see it on the tracks. Now, when you push this, when you do this, you have to make sure you deselect the mix button for each individual track of your drums. So for example, if I'm over here, I've got all my drums over here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I've got all my drums here. All of these, the mix button must be up. You have to disengage the mix button for your channels over here on this side of the mixer, because if you don't, you're going to be double monitoring. Remember, your short fader has a mix button, your long fader has a mix button, but also your bus faders have mix buttons as well. You only want to have 1 mix button pressed at a time. You do not want to have 2 mix buttons pressed for a channel. Not going to break anything, but it's also going to sound weird. It's going to make things a little bit louder, and if you're going between your computer and your audio, your console, then you're going to have a little bit of delay going on there, which is going to make it sound weird. Okay, cool. So in here, in Pro Tools, it works essentially the same way. I've got all my different levels here for my drums. If I want my shaker to be louder, whoops. I can turn it up like this. And if this is my mix but I want everything to be quieter in general, I can just turn it down right here. Right, and that's how that works, okay? Awesome. And that is the subgroup mixing on the Audient. Okay, now let's just go over here real quick and talk about the pre-fader, post-fader situation that's going on with our aux sends. And what I'm really referring to here is here. Remember, on each aux part here, before we talk about that, Crispy says, what was the quick button for turning that from multi-fader to single fader? You're talking about the groups in here. I just turned on my groups off just down here in the lower left-hand corner like you said, but I used a quick key for it. Remember, I've got my keyboard focus mode turned on down here in the left, and I've got it set for D, which I set up when I set up my group. So if I hit D on my keyboard, it just turns these from group to no group here. So you can see here across here, see how it says drums, and if I hit D, now it no longer says drums. So if I just want to move one fader, I'd make sure the group is off down here, and if I want to have all my faders move, I make sure the group is on. So yeah, you just turn that button, you just turn this off down here to use one, or you turn it on to use multiple ones after you set up that group. Now, that is a group, that's a Pro Tools group, that's what we call a mix group, not to be confused with the subgrouping, which we were talking about here, yeah. Yeah, just D, whatever, see how these groups have the little, they have letters down here. I put V, E for guitar, A for acoustic guitar, B for bass, D for drums. Well, when I made the group, if I go over here and I modify it, when I made the group, I set that up. So I set up my letter on it, and this is something I've done in several videos and shown y'all to do that. And the reason why I showed you to do that was so we can just use that letter to turn them on and off. But in order for that to work, you have to have this keyboard focus mode turned on for your groups over here. Okay, and again, it's one of those things that's like, if it's not working, it's probably because you didn't press this button, or maybe you didn't put the right letter in here, something like that. There's so many places where you can kind of go astray with this. It's a very simple little thing, but there's several places where things could be missing. So A through Z, ha 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 ha. Yep. All right. So in here, just real quick, let's get back into here. So on each of our aux areas, auxes, you have this pre button, and the pre button stands for pre-fader. And that's pre-fader versus post-fader. So if the button is engaged, if you push the button down, that's going to make your auxes be pre-fader. By default, everything is post-fader. Now, what does that mean, pre-fader versus post-fader? So let's take a look at our little pictures here. Let's say we have a water faucet. You have a main water faucet here, and that water faucet is dumping water from the sink into a bowl. And you're filling up that bowl with water. So this is like our audio. The audio is going through here, it's coming out here, and it's going into something. Well, if I then decide, you know what, I want to have another pipe connected to this pipe here, so I have two faucets going into two different bowls. So the second pipe I put here, if we put it after this faucet right here, well, what's going to happen? If I can control the level of water going into this bowl over here with this faucet right here. But if I wanted to turn off this faucet here, it's going to actually affect the water going to both bowls, right? Because the pipe is connected here after the faucet, right? So the pipe is after the faucet here. So if I turn this pipe on or off, it's going to affect the water going to both of my bowls here. I hope that makes some kind of sense. That is what we call post-fader. If I go to pre-fader, this means that I put the pipe before this faucet right here. So if I turn this faucet off here, it's no longer going to affect the water going to this bowl over here. This water will stay the same, and if I turn this faucet off, it'll affect this water, but this faucet will no longer affect the water. Can you see how that works there? This one here, the pipe is after the faucet. This one here, the pipe is before the faucet. So this is pre-fader. This one is post-fader. So these faucets in this analogy are like our faders to make the volume louder or softer. And if I have my main fader on my channel over here, when I turn this up or down, it's also affecting how much level is going to this right here. So if I go ahead, I'm going to mute all my little drums here. Actually, let's do it like this. Mute these all like that. And we're going to turn this up. Okay. So you can hear the reverb there. I'm turning it up a lot so you can hear it a lot. Now if I turn down my fader up here in the upper left here, it's going to give me less reverb. See, less reverb, right? But it didn't turn down the level of my sound at all. My sound was still playing, it's just all we heard was the dry sound, right? Well, if I go in here and I hit play again, and I turn this fader down here, it's turning everything down, the drum and the reverb, and the reason why it's doing that is because that fader is set up here before the other fader. So even though this fader is up top, it's actually in our signal after this fader right here. But if I push the pre button, the pre button means that the pre button is right there. If I push this pre button, what that means is it doesn't matter what I do with this fader here, it's still going to be the same amount of reverb, same amount of being sent to the reverb over here. So let's listen to that. I'm going to turn it down. Now all we are hearing is reverb. If I want to turn down the reverb, send, I can turn it down right here. So this one is dry. This one is with reverb. This is our reverb send. And the reason why these are now independent of each other is because the pipe is coming out here before this faucet right here. That's pre-fader. Now, the reason why we usually use pre-fader, the main reason we use pre-fader is for headphone mixes. We want to be able to send out a mix to our, we want to have several different mixes going on at the same time. If we have multiple musicians who want to hear different levels of things, but we also want to hear our level of things in our control room, that's when we create a headphone mix. So essentially what a headphone mix is, an individual mix for different musicians in the studio. The faders represent the control room mix, and that's all this down here across the bottom here of the screen. The control room mix is our faders across this way. Now, if I have 4 musicians and they all want different mixes, I have to have 4 aux sends. So in this case, aux 1 is the vocals, aux 2 is the guitar, aux 3 is the bass, and aux 4 is the drums. So we have to have 4 different headphone cables going out, coming from our auxes. So the way this works is like a grid. My vocal is coming into channel 1, my guitar is coming into channel 2, my bass is coming into channel 3, and my drum is coming into channel 4. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. My aux send is number 1 is sending to the vocals, number 2 is sending to the guitar, number 3 is sending to the bass, number 4 is sending to the drums. So I go in this grid and I just turn up whatever I want to send to wherever I want. So this list here, it tells me exactly what we're looking for. The vocalist wants lots of vocals in their headphone, a little bit of guitar, and a little bit of bass, and a little bit of drums. The guitar player wants lots of guitar, lots of drums, medium bass, and a little bit of vocal. The bass wants lots of bass and drums, medium guitar, and a little bit of vocal. And the drummer only wants bass and guitar. So we have to set all of our aux sends to pre-fader. and then we just make adjustments like this. So the vocalist wants lots of vocals, so I go ahead and I turn up my vocals here. See, vocals, track 1 is vocals, boom, so the vocalist here gets lots of vocals. They want a little bit of guitar, so the guitar is track number 2, aux 1, a little bit of guitar. They want a little bit of bass, so bass is number 3, a little bit of bass right there, and drums, number 4, a little bit of drums. The guitar player wants lots of guitar and lots of drums, so the guitar is number 2 and the drums is number 4, so we're going to go here to aux number 2 and go ahead and turn up that guitar and turn up the drums. They want medium bass, so bass is number 3, going to turn up to medium right there, and just a little bit of vocal. So we're going to go over here to our vocals, and we're going to get the vocals set to a little bit. The bass player on aux 3 wants lots of bass and drums, medium guitar, and a little bit of vocals. So the bass player here wants lots of bass and drums are 3 and 4, so lots of that right there, lots of this, and lots of this. And then the guitar is medium right here, guitar is channel number 2, and the vocals is channel number 1, and right there, medium. I'm good. I'm glad, Moises. I'm glad you're getting it. And then the drum only wants bass and drums. The drummer does not want any guitar or vocals. So the vocal is channel 1, the guitar is channel 2. We're going to turn those all the way down here for aux 4, and 3 and 4 are going to get turned up here. Okay. And that's pretty much how you set up a headphone mix. Now, if I wanted to set up a headphone mix in Pro Tools, let me just show you that real quick. So in Pro Tools, what I would do is I would go ahead and just show only my aux sends, because remember, only my aux tracks here, and I actually don't need to show my reverbs. No reverbs. I don't need the reverb. I don't need the solo group, or I just want my guitars as a whole. I don't need to see my Moog. I don't need to see my synths. Yep. My vocal verse group. I don't need to see these individually here. We're just going to show just the... Yep, cool. So I've got my main groups here. I've got my drum group, I've got my bass group, I've got my guitar group, and I've got my vocal group in here. And what we can do is we can say, okay, I'm going to go ahead and make aux send out for my different players. So we're going to go ahead and expand. So I'm just going to expand all these sends here. All 4 of them, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like that. We're going to turn off the D. We don't need D. Yep, okay. Or E. Wait, A, B, C, D. We need D. Sorry, not D. We need D. We don't need E. That's the one we don't need. Okay. And I'm going to go ahead and not show my inserts. I just want to be able to see everything on the screen here. So I want to be able to see the name of stuff, and I want to be able to see my aux sends over my auxes here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make 4 more mono auxes. Usually these are mono. And we're going to call these one headphone out. Boom. Headphone 1, 2, 3, and 4. See this here? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say headphone number 1 would be my drums. Headphone number 2 would be my bass. Oops. Headphone 3 would be my guitar. And headphone 4 would be my vocals. So I've got this here. Now these would be like my masters here. I'm going to go ahead and solo save these. And, oh, I made these, I'm sorry. You know what? I made these wrong. These are supposed to be auxes. There we go. Yeah. Okay. There we go. This is better. Whoops. Okay. So now we've got this headphone, drum, headphone, bass, headphone, guitar, headphone, vocal. There we go, much better. Okay, so these are my masters here. And I gotta make sure these are turned up here. And this one here, headphone for drums, would be aux, it'd be bus. Set these up. I'm gonna give these names. Give them better names. Okay. So bus 15, 16, 17, and 18 are here. So I'm going to rename this one aux 11. Number 16 will be aux 12. Aux 13. And aux 14. So now what I'm going to do is over here with these, I'm going to have this one up here be aux 11, and this one here is going to be aux 12. These ones here are going to be aux 13. These ones here are going to be aux 14. And this is my, I'll just leave that open so it's not all the way at the edge of the screen. These here are my, it's my routing matrix for stuff. So for example, aux 11 is the drums. So if I want my drummer wants to hear tons of, my drummer wants to hear a lot of guitar, right? So I just say, okay, cool. So we got this here, guitar, boop, 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 like that, and sorry, not guitar, wants to hear a lot of drums. So of course I want to hear a lot of drums, and wants to hear a bit of bass, like that, and very little guitar, and a lot of vocals. So it'd be a setup like this. So aux 11 is this one, aux 12, aux 13, aux 14, like that. I'm sorry. Sorry, I'm setting these up wrong. My brain is not here. First of all, these all need to be pre-fader. Sorry, I just did it a bit wrong there. It's going to go across like this. So the drummer is aux 11 like this, so they're going to get lots of drum, lots of bass, no guitar, and lots of vocals. And then my bass player, let's say the bass player wants to hear lots of drums and lots of bass, a little bit of guitar and a little bit of vocals. And then my guitar player is number 13 here. So my guitar player wants to hear lots of drums and some bass and lots of guitars, of course, and some vocals. And then the vocalist wants to hear just a little bit of all these. And then lots of vocals. Like that. So that's how we would set this up. Make sure you're going across like this. Okay. And then you can set this up in Pro Tools like this. This is how it would work on the Audient as well. It all looks the same way. So, cool. All right. Okay, so just to recap a couple things here. How would the auxes then go to the headphones? Well, what you have is the next piece of the puzzle we're going to be talking about tomorrow is your patch bay. So in the patch bay, what happens is the auxes, you're going to patch the auxes to go to your headphone situation, whatever your headphone situation is in the studio. In our case, we have a Furman, and the Furman has a stereo left and right, and it also has 4 individuals. So you'd patch the auxes into those individuals to go to the Furman like that. And that's kind of case by case depending on how your studio is set up. But yeah, it's all about the patch bay, which we haven't talked about yet. We're going to be talking about the patch bay tomorrow. So some boards do have like multiple might have like 2 headphone jacks or something like that. But yeah, you would need an interface. In this situation, yeah, if we are using Pro Tools, these auxes would go to separate outputs on my audio interface. So I'd make sure I'd have these set for different outputs on the audio interface. I don't really have that capability right now, but yeah, in order to do a headphone mix for your musicians, you need to have multiple outputs. Yeah, if you're not working at SAE. Yep. Mm-hmm. So that's something you have to keep in mind if you are doing mixes if you're doing recording for bands and stuff like that. One thing that you have to consider is, do you want to be able to set up headphone mixes for those bands? A lot of bands, it really depends on the musician. Some people don't need a headphone mix to be really different. Depends on how they're playing, how they're recording, how many people are recording at the same time, how much separation you have. Are they in the same room? Are they not in the same room? Stuff like that. So just because you're working with a band doesn't automatically mean that you need to have a headphone mix. It really depends on your studio situation. But yeah, Nico, you're absolutely right. And Matteo, you're absolutely right. That patch bay is so important. Yep. And we're going to be learning about it. The patch bay, and we're leaving it kind of towards the end because it can be pretty confusing. But we'll be talking about it tomorrow in the next class. All right. So go ahead and pause the recording here.